We'll let our speaker go through the slides, and then there'll be enough time for Q&A, so you can hold off to your questions then or type them as they occur to you. So with that, let's get started. I'm with Flightbase Inc., who's hosting this webinar today. Flightbase is an enterprise drone automation company. So essentially, we make software solutions that help our customers automate their drone operations, whether it's outdoors or indoors. So we have solutions for outdoors like FlightNow, which can be used to deploy drones for applications such as security, surveillance, public safety, delivery, and so on. And we have indoor solutions as well, especially for warehouses and distribution centers. So that's kind of the spirit of this webinar, that what we are seeing with our customers, especially in those in the third-party logistics industry, is that on one hand, there is a lot of growth thanks to e-commerce. And on the other hand, there is the risk of commoditization because it's fairly old industry, and more players have been entering it, and it's getting commoditized to the point where customers can switch from one 3PL to another. And so what we are learning from customers is that automation seems to be the way which allows 3PLs to differentiate themselves and keep pace with the e-commerce-led growth and with consumer expectations. And so for that, we decided to invite our speaker today, Gwain Richards, to walk us through some of his thoughts on 3PLs and automation and innovation in the industry. So Gwain is the founder director at Apprise Consulting in the UK. I think there's a comment. So right now, all the audience, your microphones are disabled. If you have any comments or questions, you can please put it in the chat window. But continuing with Gwain's introduction, Gwain has over 35 years of experience in the logistics and supply chain industry. He has worked for a number of logistics service providers. He's also set up his own consultancy to assist companies to improve their operations, reduce costs, and increase client satisfaction. Gwain is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, and also a practicing associate of the Academy of Experts. He's also written 3 books on topics such as warehouse management, logistics outsourcing, and logistics and supply chain tools. So with that, I will hand it over to Gwain to walk us through this presentation and share his expertise and experience on automation and innovation in third-party logistics. Over to you, Gwain. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Kaushik. Yes, as Kaushik says, I spent my first 20 years in third-party logistics with, firstly, British Road Services, which was a forerunner of XL Logistics, which then became DHL, and then for Nedloyd Districenters, a Dutch 3PL company, Danzus, who, again, in turn, became DHL as well. So let me thank the team at Flightbase for inviting me to speak at this webinar, and also for choosing the topic on third-party logistics and automation. So let's make a start. Meet, if you can pass the slide show across to me, that would be great.
I've given you the control line, if you can.
It doesn't seem to be working. It's a good start.
Can you switch to the next slide, right? You can just press the arrow button.
Yeah, we can see the slides changing, Gwain.
Okay, apologies for that. Okay, so the talk today is going to be about 3PL and the introduction of automation into 3PL warehouses. So we're going to look at the enablers for that, but also the barriers to automation as well. And one of the things I did prior to putting the slideshow together as well was to talk to some of the automation suppliers to find out from their point of view what they thought about automation and 3PLs and the take-up of automation by 3PLs as well. And from the number of automation companies that I spoke to, it's something like about between 10 and 20% of their projects are directly with 3PLs. probably another up to 20% are projects that are with companies who outsource to 3PLs. So it's the company warehouse and their automation, but it's managed by a 3PL company. And then 60% directly with the end user themselves. Okay. So in terms of context, what we're seeing is a significant growth in e-commerce. And that means that we can't really operate warehouses now with just people. So the idea is to try and introduce more automation into the warehouse itself. And with e-commerce, what we're seeing is this introduction of both next day and same day delivery. So the actual lead time for a warehouse is shortening significantly. For example, here in the UK, we have a fashion retailer, Next, and they have an order cutoff time of midnight. So that doesn't give the warehouse manager a great deal of time to pick and pack that order, get it to the courier for that next day delivery. So shorter order lead times is a big challenge for warehouses today. But it's not just e-commerce. We also have a situation with retailers where they're still operating bricks and mortar stores as well. So the challenge that we have in those warehouses is not only handling full case and pallet picks out to the stores, but also individual item picks as well for e-commerce. And us as consumers demanding this very quick service, but also the increase in returns as well. So we've got to manage those returns back into the warehouse. Alongside that, what we're seeing is this shortage in skilled labor globally. And I think globally we have an aging workforce as well. So as we can see, e-commerce operations requiring anything up to 3,000 employees within a warehouse operation. But what we're also seeing is that a recent survey in the US suggesting that employers can't find the skilled workers they need. So it's an interesting situation where we have the possibility of introducing automation, which people would argue is going to take jobs away from people. But on the other hand, we've also got automation as a savior, I suppose, in being able to take over from warehouses where they're struggling to find people. We're also seeing, with this growth in e-commerce, a shortage of warehouses or real estate as well. And of course, over the last 12 months, we've seen COVID-19 and the effect that can have on our logistics operations. Not only social distancing or the requirement for social distancing within the warehouse, but also sickness as well. And we had an example here in the UK with XPO Logistics, who are operating a dedicated warehouse for a frozen food company, and nearly 10% of their workforce went home sick with COVID. And obviously then the requirement then for social distancing, people staying at home. So big challenges for the warehouse itself. And as we can see from the graph here, this percentage share of the retail market increasing significantly from the point of view of e-commerce. And there was a recent survey undertaken by McKinsey, and they looked at the share of e-commerce versus retail, and they reckoned that they'd seen 10 years of growth within a 3-month period. So COVID has had a big impact on that. So what about third-party logistics companies and automation? I suppose in the past we've not seen a great deal of automation within 3PLs, as I mentioned with the figures that I got from some of the automation equipment suppliers. And interestingly, one of the quotes, specifically the one in MMH magazine, where it's saying that the 3PL industry is no longer your father's 3PL. And that resonated with me because back in 1997, when I was working for Nedloyd Districenters, I'd go and visit potential clients. And one of the things that they would say to me was that 3PLs that were doing the work for them weren't innovative enough, and certainly weren't proactive. And to a degree, that was true of my own company at that time. So I was doing my MBA at the time as well. And so I decided to write my dissertation on innovation in third-party logistics. But the title became Innovation in Third-Party Logistics, open brackets, or lack of it, close brackets. And the reason for that was that I would talk to a number of potential companies, and they would say that, yeah, not getting the innovation. The 3PLs themselves would say that they were too busy operating to be able to take a step back and look at the market and what was happening, and look at the operation as well, and what they could do to improve it. But also what I did see as well was that I interviewed the distribution director of Tesco's at the time, and he said that he outsourced because he wanted the 3PL to just do the work and he would do the thinking for them, which was an interesting viewpoint. And then finally, in terms of profitability, at the time, profit margins were quite low, and therefore 3PLs were reluctant to invest that profit back into the business because it was so low. And I've just checked a survey that comes out every year by Motor Transport here in the UK, and they survey and look at the top 100 companies, 100 logistics companies, and the return on sales figure for them is down at 1.41% at the moment. So again, that makes it quite difficult for 3PLs to introduce more investment into the business. However, I think, and looking at Rob Thien from Geodis at the bottom there, he's saying that one of the things that his company and other 3PLs are going to have to do to ensure that they cover consumer requirements is to invest in automation. So, what are customer expectations from their third-party logistics partners? Well, first and foremost, it's obviously to meet or hopefully exceed the service level agreement key performance indicators. And one of those being the perfect order index. So delivery on time, in full, damage-free, and rather strangely in our digital world today, with the correct paperwork. So the right invoicing, delivery documentation, customs documentation, for example, and then stock accuracy within the warehouse. And then we come to areas such as continuous improvement and, not surprisingly, cost reduction, good customer relationship. And that's not just with the direct customer, but with the customer's customer as well. And then that word innovation, coming up with new ideas for the customer so that the customer can differentiate themselves within their own marketplace. So how can 3PLs meet these expectations? Well, experience and knowledge, at the forefront. 3PLs are seen as the companies that are experienced in logistics, and therefore that's what customers are looking for. They don't always have the expertise within their own company to come up with these new ideas, these innovative ideas. The larger 3PLs may well have increased buying power compared to a single retailer, for example. So the 3PL can go out and hopefully get lower costs in terms of the technology and automation out there. And also now with 3PLs, this ability to analyze big data, introduce technologies such as the Internet of Things, vision picking, all of these different types of technologies that can improve operations within the warehouse. And then our talk today in terms of automation. So in terms of automation itself, there are, I kind of split it into two areas. One being static infrastructure. So our automated storage and retrieval systems, mini load systems, shuttle systems. So those require a lot of infrastructure, a lot of steel to actually put up in the warehouse. And it takes a while to actually install these into the warehouses themselves. And then we have the auto store grids. So a number of retailers introducing this system into their warehouses at the moment. Companies like Asda, Ocado have introduced their own system into their e-fulfillment centers as well. So those are quite static and require quite a lot of investment in the equipment itself. What we've seen recently is this introduction of more flexible automation. So autonomous mobile robots. And my understanding is that these first came on the market through a company called Kiva. Kiva were approached by Amazon, and Kiva put their system into an Amazon warehouse. Amazon was so impressed with the system that they actually bought Kiva, and now Amazon are rolling out the system into their own warehouses. And the system is basically robots which carry the shelving with the goods on them to a picker at a pick station, who picks the item using pick to light and then places the item into a carton or into a tote for delivery to the packing area or dispatch area. What we're seeing is a number of other companies introducing a very similar system. So we have companies like Grey Orange, HIC Robotics, Aerotech, Geek Plus, Swisslog, and I'm sure there are a few others out there as well. What we also have are collaborative mobile robots as well. Companies such as Fetch Robotics and Locus Robotics coming up with these ideas. And here we have the robots actually following the picker around, the picker placing items onto the CMR, and the CMR taking the item either into the next picking zone or off to dispatch. And the same with automated guided vehicles as well. So a forklift truck, driverless forklift truck following the picker around the warehouse, the picker probably using voice technology, placing the items onto the pallet. Once the order is complete, the truck taking the completed order to the dispatch area, and a different truck turning up to the picker who can carry on with the next order. So it means that the picker remains in the pick area, doesn't have to jump on and off the truck all the time, and the truck takes the order to dispatch. So it reduces the amount of travel for the actual operators within the warehouse. So what are the benefits for 3PLs to introduce automation into the warehouse itself? Well, certainly, the expectation would be increased accuracy, increased productivity. Interestingly, increased worker safety. Yes, it's usually humans that cause accidents within the warehouse itself. But there are some reports coming out of the US at the moment where systems like this where productivity is increased, 3 or 4-fold, that they're seeing more muscular injuries. So people standing at their pick stations for a long period of time and actually handling more and more product, ending up with with a few more muscle injuries. So that's something to look at over time. So with automation, we can have a 24/7 operation, and all of these should result in time and cost savings. And as Kaushik mentioned, the market itself can be quite commoditized in terms of picking, packing and dispatch. So by introducing automation, that should give 3PLs more of a competitive edge, and in turn give their own customers competitive edge. Because when we look at e-commerce, then a lot of the competition is in how quickly we can get the goods to the customer. So by introducing automation, they can have competitive edge, but also improve their brand image, and over time, hopefully, increase those profit margins from the 1.41% average that we're seeing at the moment. So what's going to enable the 3PLs to introduce the automation itself? Well, certainly the introduction of these autonomous mobile robots and collaborative mobile robots, especially those where the companies are offering a leasing or rental scheme for these automated systems. So that gives 3PLs more flexibility compared to having to kit out a whole warehouse with steel infrastructure, for example. So having the AMRs and CMRs, we can actually see a quicker implementation period as well. So having that kind of flexibility is an enabler. Another enabler would be where the client actually underwrites or acquires the equipment themselves. I had a discussion with a UK retailer recently, and they outsource their warehouse operation to a third-party logistics company who supply the staff and the management, but the actual warehouse and all of the equipment inside it is actually owned or leased by the customer themselves. So that's another potential enabler for the 3PL. Longer contracts. I think over recent times, we've seen a reduction in the length of 3PL contracts, where companies want that flexibility to be able to change if things aren't working. So it's been quite nice to see in the trade press recently, Clipper Logistics, UK third-party logistics company, signing a 5-year deal with River Island, a fashion retailer in the UK, and a 10-year deal with Mountain Warehouse. And that kind of certainty of contract allows the 3PL to actually go out and invest in automation. Also, we have shared risk as well. In the past, 3PLs have been criticized for being risk averse. So actually sharing the risk with their customers would be another enabler. And then finally, we've got Generation Z entering the marketplace. So we have young people coming into warehousing who are better in terms of working with technology and things like that. So that is another enabler to introduce automation into the 3PL warehouses. So just that's a photograph of a company called Aerotech and their robots and their shelving. So it tells you how the system works. So in terms of barriers, certainly cost and return on investment. And if the contract length isn't long enough, then 3PLs are unlikely to invest in equipment where they're not going to get a quicker return on investment, or a return on investment that is shorter than the contract length. We talked about risk. Available real estate, again, is another potential barrier. And I was reading an article recently where we're seeing some warehouses now, actually being operated in the middle of cities, and not above ground, but underground. There's an example of one in Tel Aviv, where a company has introduced a micro fulfillment center in an old disused underground car park. And so what they've done is they've kitted it out with all of the equipment. And of course, that means they're much closer to their end customers. So it's a micro fulfillment for a grocery operation. Other barriers for companies include the actual number of product lines, also the shapes and sizes of these products. With automation, you tend to require products to fit nicely into these 600 by 400 mil totes, for example, for movement around the warehouse. So that can be a bit of a barrier, as can seasonality. But again, having the ability to rent additional AMRs or CMRs for the busier periods, that allows automation to happen as well. In terms of types of 3PL contracts, we have shared user warehousing. So here we have warehouses where it could be similar products. I worked for Nedlloyd Districenters, which is a Dutch warehousing company. And being Dutch, they had a warehouse in Holland, which was full of bicycles for a number of different manufacturers. And so there was economies of scale there and a sharing of delivery costs out to the retailers from the different manufacturers. Other shared user types of operation might have diverse products. When I worked for Nedlloyd in the UK, we had clients in the warehouse who sold toys, pet food products, white goods, beers, wines, and spirits. So lots of different types of products there. And these tend to be under closed book charging arrangements. So the customer doesn't know what the cost of the operation is. And if the 3PL can be more productive, then by being better in terms of productivity, they can increase their profit margins. And then we have the dedicated contracts. So customer-owned premises and equipment, as I mentioned earlier, or it could be that the warehouse is owned by the 3PL themselves and they've acquired all of the equipment. These tend to be what we term open book arrangements with a management fee. So the customer is aware of all of the costs and they agree a management fee with the 3PL. And those are normally based on productivity and improvement. So the better the operation, the more the management fee paid to the 3PL. And the company that I was talking to earlier about automation, they have an open book agreement with their 3PL with gain share. So again, the more savings that the company makes, the 3PL makes, the more profit they receive from their customer. So what of the future? I suppose I had my tongue in my cheek when I first wrote the demise of the 3PL, but I looked at it in a situation for dedicated warehouse contracts. Where's the value, the added value from the 3PL? Because if we replace all of the operatives in the warehouse itself, and the customer and the automation supplier come up with a fully automated warehouse, where does the 3PL fit into that? So I'm sure that 3PLs will still be around for a long time, but it's an interesting concept as to whether we'll see some companies move away from 3PLs back to operating their own logistics in-house if we go to full automation. Not so easy to do with shared user warehouses, and with the growth in e-commerce, then We're seeing a lot of new retailers entering the e-com market, and they're not going to all want their own warehouses initially. So there'll still be a lot of space there for the logistics service providers. I've also put fulfillment by Amazon, but not just Amazon. Companies like Jingdong or JD.com in China, Alibaba, eBay, for example, all of these companies could provide a similar service to those retailers. And we see Amazon doing it quite significantly at the moment. Freight transport, yeah, I think 3PLs will still be around. Although, again, if we're talking about driverless trucks, then, does that mean that that customers can operate their own transport again? But if we think about return loads and things, then we may still have a requirement for the 3PLs out there. What we may well see is this idea of the 4PL integrator. 4PLs came around about 10 to 15 years ago, I suppose, and they were supposed to be able to manage the total supply chain for their customers. But what we've seen recently are companies like DHL, XPO Logistics, Kuehne+Nagel, actually providing a 4PL service, even though the original definition was non-asset owning. We're seeing these companies now coming into that area. So, but I suppose you could call them lead logistics providers, buying in services from, I suppose, their competitors to provide a service to their customers. But we're seeing supply chain as a service growing, and these 4PL integrators managing the whole supply chain for their customers. So, in terms of 3PL and automation, I think it's going to be a necessity, because we're not going to be able to carry on throwing more and more people at warehouse operations for e-commerce. So there's going to have to be an introduction of more automation into these warehouses. But again, what we need to think about is how this automation is paid for, and more collaboration between the 3PL and the customer. Okay, let me hand back to Kaushik, and he'll talk about 3PLs and the drone technology.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm sure that you've seen several waves of automation since you published your master's thesis on this topic. But I also think that probably some of the underlying factors that drive these things remain the same, whether it's payback periods and business case, or who will pay for the initial technology risk and worker safety and so on. And in fact, here's a quote from one of our customers who runs a company which is a mid-sized third-party logistics company in the US. And although the quote was given to us in the context of inventory drones, you'll see that a lot of the things that Gwain talked about are pretty much at the top of the mind of our customers, especially 3PL stakeholders, when it comes to how do they deal with things like same-day delivery and faster and faster expectations in terms of being able to move inventory around, and at the same time make sure that their margins aren't affected. In fact, in the last few weeks, we have also started hearing conversations around what if the minimum wage goes up in the US. How does that further accelerate automation? Because it's going to directly hit the bottom line of 3PL companies, who today probably have on average around 100-person workforce in a typical distribution center. And next slide, please. So again, quickly, just to give a glimpse at what Flightbase is doing in this area, we of course have a solution around drones. So the idea here is we have developed our own intelligent software which allows us to take off-the-shelf drones. These drones tend to be very reliable, very cost-effective, and very easily available. But by putting our intelligence automation software on top of that, we're able to fly these drones inside warehouses without having any GPS connectivity. And of course, the use case that we are focused right now on is, can we have these drones scan pallet barcodes and single deep case reserve barcodes in traditional aisles, in very narrow aisles, and soon even bulk inventory, so that instead of people and forklifts and barcode scanners being used, we can have these very small drones in large fleets doing the job fully autonomously 24/7. So that's just a quick bit about FlightWare. Next slide, please, Meet. So that's it for the presentation part today. We request you to share your questions through the Q&A box here. A few things I wanted to point out. First of all, these slides have been published online on our website here already. And a recording of this webinar will also be published on our site as well as on the Apprise Consulting site. So please have a look at that in a few days. And I'll request Meet to launch a poll. There's 5 questions in the poll. We request you to participate. We just wanted to know your thoughts about some of the important aspects about 3PLs. And of course, the link that you see on the slide here, all our past webinars are also published there, the slides and the recording. And upcoming webinars are also listed there, including the topics and some of the dates. So look forward to everybody participating in this poll, and in parallel you can also type your questions, and we'll take those questions between Gwain and I. I hope people are able to post questions in the Q&A box. If not, then you can use the chat window as well. So meanwhile, let me get things started on the questions front. So Gwain, I have a few questions that came to mind as you were presenting, and this again is something that we've also observed with our 3PL customers, that what are the dynamics in the decision making process that goes on between 3PLs and their customers when it comes to automation. Who decides to bear the risk? How does that play out? If you can share some thoughts on that, please.
Yes, that's a difficult one to answer. As I mentioned right at the beginning, the situation where something like only 10 to 20% of automation systems at the moment are projects that are directly for 3PLs. I think it very much comes down to the return on investment, the shared risk aspect as well. And as I said, 3PLs tend to be quite risk averse still, and therefore they would need to be certain that any investment that they make, they're going to see some kind of return on it. Which is where the more flexible types of automation, including obviously your own, comes into it, because then that type of automation can be transferred between locations as well.
I see. And again, you made a point in one of your later slides about the Generation Z entering the marketplace. That was interesting because that generation thinks quite differently than the previous generation. So when it comes to 3PLs investing in training their workforce, to kind of learn new skills when it comes to operating these autonomous systems, how do you see them thinking about this? Would they prefer to retrain their existing workforce, or instead shift to a Generation Z workforce, which probably is better trained or more comfortable with these technologies? If you can share some thoughts on those, please.
I think it would be a mix of both, really. The fact that people aren't always au fait with technology doesn't mean that they can't learn and use those systems. And of course, if you think about it, they have the knowledge of what goes on in a warehouse as well. So yes, Generation Z will be an advantage to companies to take those people on, but you certainly don't want to get rid of the expertise as well. I suppose one of the big challenges though is that warehousing has not been seen as a go-to career for young people. Yeah, I'm sure they still think that warehouses are dark, dingy, horrible places where stock is stored and that's about it. Whereas if we're able as an industry to show young people what actually happens in a warehouse and the technology now that is being introduced into warehouses, such as vision picking, voice technology, automation, with your own company again with drones, I'm sure that younger people will be more interested in actually working with working in warehouses.
Yeah, I get your point, Gwen. And again, slightly related to that, when it comes to health and safety, with all this automated equipment moving around, when we look at deploying drones in warehouses and we go to our customers and ask them about, OSHA in the US or other health and safety regulators, it's interesting because it's not even come to the point where OSHA has decided to regulate. So, when we started doing this, we thought, we don't know what we'll have to deal with in terms of health and safety. And now we are realizing that probably we are the ones who are going to have to educate the health and safety personnel here. But if in the last, 2-3 decades, as other automation came around, if you have seen any things, any patterns around how do the health and safety regulators start getting involved when it comes to making sure people are safe around robots? Please share any observations you have made on this.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is very much down to the suppliers of the equipment, and yeah, certainly with the autonomous robots, then they all have sensors so that they stop, when they're in the vicinity of pedestrians and things like that. So I think with the suppliers themselves, I think they look at the regulations and and undertake the kind of risk assessments to make sure that their equipment will actually comply with the regulations that are already there. But as you say, I'm sure that here in the UK, the Health and Safety Executive, OSHA in the US, may well look at this new kind of stream of automation and start to to look at regulations specifically for it. But again, we've had forklift trucks driving around warehouses for a very long time, and they're not too different to to these AGVs as well. So, but what we're seeing is the actual automation suppliers actually putting the sensors onto these vehicles now, so they don't crash into things or into people more.
Understood, Gwen. Thanks. There is one question from one of our attendees, Lynn. I'll take that question. So the question is, with a multi-client 3PL, how does FlightWare and automation in general deal with multiple types of customer labels? To answer that question, the way to think of solutions like FlightWare, where we are using the drone's inbuilt camera to read the customer labels, is that to the extent that those barcode labels are industry standard, what are called code 128 labels, we will be able to read all of those labels. Obviously, doesn't matter which customer they are tagged to. But at the same time, the drone solution is dumb in that it can't make sense of which label belongs to which customer. That data resides with our customers in their WMS. So usually the way it works is, each customer tells us that, look, read all the front facing labels, but then I want you to discard these labels, and with the ones that remain, I want you to apply this logic, either categorize them and so on. And that's really how we are able to differentiate between the different types of customer labels, by engaging with their customer, who probably are using different patterns or different digits for each customer, and then customizing that part of the sorting of these barcode labels in the FlightWare dashboard. So this is something we do for each customer. Once we understand what are the different barcode labels that they are using and what do they want to do with the ones that we read. I hope that answers your question, Lynn. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so we'll wait for a few seconds, and if not, we'll wrap things up here. But again, Thanks to Gwain again for taking the time. Gwain, we really appreciate your taking the time to talk to us today, and especially your deep experience in 3PLs. It's obvious in your slides and in your conversation that you have seen the industry evolve over the past decades. We are, of course, as Flightware, we are new to this industry. We have just been dealing with warehousing and distribution for a couple of years, and we are focused on a very narrow use case. So we appreciate your sharing your deep industry insights. There is one question: does the Flightware solution include interface with ERPs? Yes, very much, Sanjeev. We are able to integrate with any ERP or WMS using APIs of that system. So long as we can be given read or write access and some basic documentation about those interfaces, we can again customize our integration such that after every mission, the drone data can be pushed to the ERP, or we can pull data from the ERP and do a comparison between the drone data and the ERP data in our dashboard. So we have a lot of flexibility in terms of how this interfacing with ERPs and WMS can be done. And sometimes our customers want to just start by using CSV or Excel files. And once they are comfortable with the drone part of things, then they will get their IT team involved for a more automated interface with the ERP or the WMS. I hope that answers your question, Sanjeev. Okay, there are no more open questions. So again, request everyone to go to the webinars link and look at our past webinars as well. And we will let you know once the recording of this webinar is up. And sorry, one more question. Do you have an idea of integration cost with the WMS? So Enda, we include this cost in our own pricing. We have found working with customers that it is not very time consuming or cost intensive, because the data that the drone collects is essentially a date, a timestamp, a location ID, and then one or more barcodes that were read in there. And so to integrate that with a WMS to push this data back and forth, it's not a lot of effort. So it's something we include as part of scope of what we do. In fact, we do it during the pilot stage itself so that our customers can see the data flow end to end. You're welcome, Enda. Another question from Sanjeev: how often do you recommend to do inventory counting with our solution? So actually, it's kind of the inverse of that we ask our customers how often they want to do inventory counts, and we will accordingly configure our solution in terms of how many drones are required. What we have learned working with customers is that they may be counting it once a quarter. They really want to count it once a month, but if they have to do it manually, they realize that it's too expensive and probably impractical. And so it is things like drones and other automation solutions that are making it possible for customers to do more frequent counts than they have done otherwise using people. And again, to Gwain's point about e-commerce and same day delivery and customer expectations, it's very difficult to continue doing things the old way where you scan your whole warehouse once a quarter or even once a month. We now have customers who come to us and ask us, can you do my entire warehouse in 1 week or even on a 1 weekend? And of course, that's where things are headed as the hardware gets more and more affordable and as the software becomes more and more smart.
Yeah, can I come in on that as
yes,
well?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly as a warehouse consultant, I'd be encouraging you to do cycle counting or perpetual inventory counting, so that you're counting so many items per day, so that at some stage you won't actually have to count everything in the warehouse once a year or twice a year. If you can get an agreement with your auditors, then if you can prove that you've counted every single location at least once a year through perpetual inventory counting, then you shouldn't have to be in that situation of closing the warehouse for a week, for example, to do the full count.
Yeah, absolutely, Gwain. Thank you. A follow-up question from Sanjeev again. So to your point, the drones are not designed to fly during operational hours when there are people or equipment in the aisles. So the options are either to fly these drones automatically in the night shifts when there's nobody, or on the weekends, or in between shifts. Or if it's a 24/7 facility, then what customers are doing is they don't mind closing an aisle for a couple of hours while the drones do their job. But from a safety SOP point of view, we would not want people or equipment in the aisles when the drones fly. Another question from Enda that we have auto charging drones. So the way we have done it is we have designed our own proprietary charging pad, which uses inductive charging, so that every time the battery is about to run out, the drones automatically come near the landing pad, and using our precision landing technology, land precisely on these charging pads, which are mounted about 15 feet up in the air on the side of the racks. And then through inductive charging, they charge the batteries, and when the battery is full, the drones automatically take off, enter those aisles, and continue their missions. Yep. All right, there seem to be no more questions. So unless anyone else has any last comments, we can close here. Thank you again, Goin, so much for your time.
That's okay, Kaushik. Not a problem. If anybody does have any other questions, feel free to link in with me on LinkedIn, or send me an email. The company is apriseconsulting.co.uk. So the email would be gr@apriseconsulting.co.uk if you do have any additional questions that we haven't been able to cover today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will close this webinar and look forward to you joining us for the next webinar soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye.